I now have the pleasure of introducing our keynote speaker, the 17th president and first female president of the University of Minnesota, President T.A. Gabel. Since beginning her presidency in July, Joan Gabel's presidential initiatives aim to strengthen University of Minnesota research, education, and service to lift our state's communities and ensure that Minnesota's land-grant university stands as a beacon of inclusion, preparing students for lives well lived. Please welcome President Gabel.
Thank you, Scouts, and thanks to all of you for the invitation. Good morning. It's lovely to see you all here. I want to take just a minute to recognize some of the distinguished guests and community leaders in the room. You're all distinguished guests, and by the way, you look great, every single one of you. But I want to call and acknowledge a couple of people specifically, Brian Burnett, the Chief Financial Officer and our organizer today, and our colleague Mike Bertelson, who are here. And also a special welcome to our regents, Beeson and Rocha, and Executive Director of the Board of Regents, Brian Steeves, who are all here. And last but certainly not least, Eagle Scout and current Gopher football player, Jacob Herbers, who is here. So I thank all of them for being here with us. I don't think we can recognize Jacob, or as his coach would say, the whole team, without pointing out what an incredible season our Gopher team has had, with the best performance since 1904. And I know we all enjoyed game day on Northrop Lawn, and I know you feel the same excitement I do about our upcoming Outback Bowl against Auburn in a couple of weeks. But the football season, as amazing as it was, and of course is just the beginning of many great things to come, was just a part of what has been an amazing fall for me since joining the university on July 1st. You know, the university has only had 17 presidents in 170 years, which is really quite remarkable when you think of institutions that have a legacy like the institution whose spirit we're honoring and supporting today. It's a role that I'm personally very honored and humbled by and very inspired by, because even though I've spent my entire career almost in higher education, I can tell you that there are very few universities that do what the University of Minnesota does, which is to be deeply committed to service, but at world-class levels, at ways that are inspired by the state, and this is a very inspiring state, but impact the entire globe. And that balance is unique, and I think it's something that perhaps resonates with all of you who are so committed to scouting and what scouting does for our community. As part of my job, I have the opportunity to engage with a lot of really interesting people. I mean, I have the opportunity to be knighted as a Grand Duchess too. Who knew? That was really quite a moment. Thank you very much. But also I get to meet a lot of leaders and a lot of people who've been really impacted by the university. And as I've come on board, I travel around the cities and around the state and meet people like this who convey their passion and love for the university, what the university has meant to them, often for generations of their families, and how much pride they have in how the university impacts the state. I meet people where research saved their farm or a cure saved their family. One of our regents received a life-saving cure when he was 5 years old, Regent Tom Anderson, and not too long ago, we took the regents to one of our research facilities where you may have read in the paper, we have a group of really brilliant scholars who've unlocked the genome on the zebra mussel, and those of you who go to the lake know how important that work is, and we were talking to one of the scholars in that lab, a young scholar who said that his mother had the same life-saving surgery, a next generation of it, a few years after Regent Anderson did. And so his very existence is because of the cure that our doctors came up with, which then led him to be able to pursue his education and help the entire state with how much we enjoy the lakes and our environment in general. And that kind of loop is just, as you can imagine, for someone like me in the role that I'm in, tremendous. And that's a set of activities, a set of legacies that make our tradition so meaningful. But of course, tradition and legacy is a shared value that I know we have with everyone in this room. It's a huge part of what we're honoring and supporting and recognizing this morning, and I'm very glad to be able to do that. Scouting has been a big part of my own family's tradition. I was a Girl Scout as was my daughter, and I was her troop leader for many years, much to her embarrassment, I assure you. And both of my boys were Scouts. And now that my children are adults, I think they turned out perfectly. Does every parent in the room agree with me about their children? And I'm sure I'm not the only one who feels that way. And I have absolutely no doubt that what they learned through Scouting was a big part of who they are, a big part of how they thought about what it meant to be committed to things, to have a moral compass. I think about the Scouting Promise, which is very similar, of course, for Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, or the values that Jim referenced a few minutes ago around trust, loyalty, helping others, reverence, and others. And I think about, and as I thought about the time that I was going to be able to spend with you this morning, that when we're children, we're taught a lot of oaths and asked to recite a lot of things like the Golden Rule, or if you're Catholic like me, the Apostles' Creed. I know for the Catholics in the room, it's running through your head now. I'm sorry about that. My children heard all these messages and recited these words all the time through childhood, and I know our Scouts do too. But the Boy Scout Promise is part of why we see the children who put it into action becoming the leaders of note that we see so consistently across our community and our society. Because we all know that leadership has its foundation in ethics, the kind of ethics we see in all the different things that we say and mean when we say them, but sometimes say so often that we forget their meaning. But when you're a Scout, when you make that promise, you have to earn it, you have to act, you have to do things incrementally. You have to progress. You really have to commit. You make a promise. You make a promise to respect yourself so that you can serve others. It's not something you can just claim. You have to do it. You wear it. It's an honor and a privilege. And we all recognize it, and we know what it does for our community. We know what it does for the children who go through it and become the adults that we very much hope they will be. And I meet a lot of people who've been Scouts who go on to become tremendous leaders, titans of industry, scientists, doctors, athletes, financiers, and often quieter leadership that sometimes happens behind the scenes, which is often the most impactful kind. And some of these leaders were Scouts, but all of them live their lives in service. They live by helping others. They live by inspiring others. They respect themselves in ways that allow them to do service for others. And another wonderful part of my job is that I get to see a lot of young people who are young adults or on the cusp of adulthood, some of whom have come up through the ranks of Scouting. And they're so bright and passionate, and I tell you, I know a lot of us are worried about what's going on in society right now, and if you ever want to feel better, you should spend some time with our students, because you will. They are bright and passionate, and they care, and they're committed, and they want things to be better. And it's often during this phase of our lives, as many of us can remember, being university students, that you see leadership spirit sort of evolve. You see people blossom. This is when people spread their wings for the first time, when as they advance, they don't earn a badge, they just do it because they know it's the right thing to do. And it's that moment where those badges or those advancements become something else or something more, often for the first time. It's when they really see that when they work to support and inspire others, when they really lean into kindness and compassion, that they do help people at all times. And it's often because of what Scouting taught them or what being in the presence of other Scouts allows them to learn and be. And I'm reminded when I reflected on the fact that I would be able to be with you this morning of a quote by Life Scout, not Eagle Scout, but Life Scout Bill Gates, pretty successful guy, who said, as we look ahead, leaders will be those who empower others. So I thank all of you for your service and for your commitment and for supporting Boy Scouts this morning, for empowering and inspiring these children who will become future Gophers, Scouts, future Gophers, but also our future as a community and as a society, as thinkers, as learners, as lifelong students in the way that we need them to be. And I thank you for hosting me and honoring me both with the opportunity to speak and also with being knighted this morning, and for all you do to support this entire community and how you support the University of Minnesota. So thank you very much.